Mother, what are you doing? When we returned from shopping, what we saw was a moving company parked in front of our house and the site of my in-laws. My mother-in-law glanced at me in surprise and continued to give instructions to the movers. You're a nuisance. Please do not enter someone else's house without permission. You're being insolent. Open the door quickly. My father-in-law said this and reached for my bag. I hugged my bag and backed away. Seeing this, my mother-in-law laughed mockingly and continued speaking. Strangers should leave quickly, haha. At my mother-in-law's words, I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't respond. However, hearing this, Robert was visibly shaken and trembling. Mom, don't you know? What? At this moment, I thought it was the right time to tell the truth. Determined, I decided to confront my shouting mother-in-law with the truth. My name is Gina Anderson. I am 48 years old and run an insurance agency. This company was started by my father and I took it over. Being strict and meticulous, the job of tailoring insurance to the needs of clients was the perfect job for me. I have good relations with long-time clients from when my father was running the company, and thankfully, the business is doing well. I met my husband Robert through work when I was 30. A long-time customer of my father introduced him to me, which led to an invitation for a cafe. That's how it all started. Robert was 2 years older than me, a very calm and dignified person. He had recently broken up with a long-term girlfriend who had cheated on him. After just a brief conversation, we hit it off immediately and exchanged contacts. Soon after, we started going out. At that time, my mother was ill, and wanting to fulfill her dream of seeing me in a wedding dress, I was actively seeking marriage. Meanwhile, Robert was not in a hurry to marry. Nevertheless, he respected my wishes, and 6 months after we met, he proposed to me. With tears of joy, I expressed my gratitude to him. Thank you. I look forward to our life together. After that, we quickly paid respects to both families and had a family-only wedding ceremony. My mother was very happy to see me in my wedding dress. The following month, she passed away quietly. It was thanks to Robert that I was able to fulfill my mother's last wish. Remembering how Robert supported me even at my mother's funeral, I resolved to cherish him for the rest of my life. Even after 5 years of marriage, we had no children. We thought of children as a gift from God and were not in a rush, but it was my in-laws who intervened. This happened during Christmas. Initially, Robert was reluctant to visit, but when my mother-in-law contacted me asking, "Why haven't you come over?" we had no choice but to go. Still no baby? When will you show us a grandchild? Mom, we've decided not to rush things. If this is going to be the topic of discussion, we're leaving. I understand that, but maybe the problem lies with Gina. Don't insult her. Sorry, Gina, we're leaving. We were supposed to come for Christmas, but at the entrance, the conversation suddenly turned to grandchildren, and Robert quickly took me away from the scene. It was I who had persuaded him to come with me. Yet, as soon as we got back to the car, Robert apologized to me. I'm really sorry for putting you through this. I'm fine, Robert. I just feel bad that you're having a hard time. I don't mind. It's my parents after all. But now, you are my family. If they hurt you, I'm willing to cut ties with them, even if they are my parents. But it's okay. I've actually been distancing myself from them since I became an adult. As Robert spoke, a look of loneliness appeared on his face, and all I could do was respond with a simple yeah. Afterward, Robert made an effort to keep a distance between me and his parents, and we decided to move. There were numerous calls asking for our address, but Robert ignored them all. For about 13 years, I managed to live without seeing my in-laws except at weddings and funerals. By the time I was over 40, my in-laws rarely mentioned grandchildren, and I felt a bit relieved. However, one day, seemingly due to a leak of information, my in-laws showed up at our home. Robert happened to be out with a friend, and knowing I was alone, my in-laws forcefully entered the house and began inspecting it. Oh my! Both of you are still sleeping in the same bed at your age? That's rather indecent. Robert won't be satisfied with the underwear I found in this laundry. Ignoring my displeased expression, my in-laws continued to rummage through the room. They even ate the food we had stored and complained while going through our drawers. This is why you haven't had grandchildren. Well, honey, it's too early to give up. Look. Saying this, my in-laws pulled out a crumpled newspaper from their bag and handed it to me. The newspaper article was about a woman who became a mother at the age of 60. Realizing their intent, I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe we've been too lenient until now. There are people who have children at your age, you know? How about you move in with us? I'm back. Did someone come over? My father came home in the middle of my mother-in-law's preaching. Ever since moving to this house, Robert had suggested living with my father. Robert cared deeply for my father, and my father doted on Robert as if he were his own son. We had not told my in-laws about this fact, so they were surprised to see my father enter the house. I can't believe it, you're letting Robert take care of your father as well. Normally, you should first show gratitude to the husband's parents. My in-laws said this as if it were obvious, nodding in agreement. I was at a loss for how to respond. I appreciate your help. Really, I never thought a father would intrude into the house our son got married into. Doesn't our son taking care of you hurt your own pride? Well, yeah. My father responded with a smile and an ambiguous reply. His attitude only irritated my in-laws further. Dad, Mom, how did you find this place? Robert, who had returned home early because a friend fell ill, was standing at the entrance of the living room, yelling furiously. While Robert openly displayed his anger, my mother-in-law responded calmly. Since we couldn't get any information from you, we had to hire a detective. It was expensive. You need to pay for it. There's no way I can pay for that. Saying this, Robert strode over to my mother-in-law with heavy footsteps and grabbed her clothes forcefully. He then forcibly made her stand up, dragged her out of the room, and took her outside. Stop it. It hurts. What are you doing? Robert, can't you see Mom is in pain? Stop it. My mother-in-law screamed in a high pitch, and following her voice, my father-in-law's angry shouts could be heard. However, Robert, undeterred, took her to the entrance and pushed her out of the house. Don't ever step foot in this house again. I intend to sever our ties. Is this Gina's doing? What kind of daughter-in-law is she? Gina has nothing to do with it. It's my decision. Please leave. While my mother-in-law was still shouting something, Robert threatened to call the police, and she reluctantly dispersed. Afterward, Robert came to apologize to me and my father. I'm really sorry. To think they'd even hire a detective. I didn't take appropriate actions towards you as well. No, it's not your fault. However, I understand for sure that you are a wonderful person. Let's enjoy dinner together. Father, I appreciate it. Robert repeated his words of gratitude and conversed with my father with tears in his eyes. That night, the three of us had a pleasant time dining together. After our discussion, we decided to proceed with a certain plan. I thought my in-laws might visit again the next day, but weeks passed and they did not appear, and it seemed our life continued to be peaceful. Then, a month after my father passed away, while Robert and I were returning from a short trip, a call came from my mother-in-law. I'm in front of the house. Open up quickly. Confused, I replied, we'll head back home now, so please wait. And my husband and I hurried home, but no one was in front of the house. Feeling this was strange, we decided to rush to another location. Mother, what are you doing? In front of us, there were movers unloading boxes and my in-laws. My mother-in-law glanced at me, surprised, and continued giving instructions to the movers. You're a nuisance. Please do not enter someone else's house without permission. You're being insolent. Open the door quickly. My father-in-law said this and reached for my bag. I hugged my bag and backed away. Seeing this, my mother-in-law laughed mockingly and continued speaking. Strangers should leave quickly, haha. At my mother-in-law's words, I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't respond. However, hearing this, Robert was visibly shaken and trembling. Mom, don't you know? What? At this moment, I thought it was the right time to tell the truth. Determined, I decided to confront my shouting mother-in-law with the truth. This is my house, you know? What are you saying? Isn't it the house Robert bought? How shameless can you be? My mother-in-law looked at me with confusion and glared. When I looked at Robert, he took a deep breath and began to speak. This is Gina's house. I'm just staying here. Actually, we've recently moved close by and now Gina uses this place as her office. Robert, is Gina blackmailing you? Poor thing. There's no need for such obvious lies. I know Gina is just a housewife. What? Robert looked up at my mother-in-law with a surprised expression. She was furious, believing I had some leverage over him, but what upset her most was her assumption that I was merely a housewife. What do you mean Gina is just a housewife? Gina runs an insurance agency. What are you talking about? She's always home. And yet she's always going out to spas or just having fun. Recently, she was even dining with some strange man at a fancy restaurant. It's disgraceful. The strange man she mentioned was likely my business partner. Recently, an old client of my late father contacted me to reminisce over lunch. It was lunch at a hotel. Originally, Robert was supposed to join, but he had work and I ended up going alone. Of course, we also discussed a new insurance plan, so it wasn't entirely a private matter, and Robert had agreed to it beforehand. If they had hired a detective, they should have known that I returned home alone after lunch. Still, the reason they are so definitively accusing me must be because they want to break us up. That person is also a client of Gina's. I just couldn't join her that day because I had work. We do dine together sometimes. Robert, you are being deceived. It's not too late to start over. Find a younger wife and have children. I can't imagine marrying anyone else but Gina, and besides, I wouldn't be able to have children with anyone else anyways. What do you mean? Both my mother and father-in-law were stunned by his outburst, and I was frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Neither Robert nor I had undergone any fertility tests. We avoided them because if one of us had an issue, it would lead to unnecessary blame. A few years ago, when I had a prolonged fever, a doctor recommended some tests, and I secretly went through them. The results showed that I am biologically unable to have children. I've been worried that if I told Gina, she might leave me. I would never leave you just because we can't have children. I know, but I couldn't help feeling anxious. Hearing this, I instinctively embraced Robert tightly. Robert reciprocated the hug. I vowed to cherish Robert even more from now on. What do you mean you can't have children? Are you flawed? You've been deceiving us all this time. My in-laws continued to berate Robert as if I wasn't there. Robert looked back at them coldly. I've always said that I am not your tool. It's not right for a parent to call their own child flawed. What's wrong with calling something flawed that is flawed? My mother-in-law's anger was evident as she grabbed Robert's clothes and confronted him. At that moment, Robert quietly muttered a man's name. Hearing the name, my mother-in-law lost color in her face and immediately let go of Robert. Who's that? I wonder? Looking bewildered, my father-in-law was confused, and mother-in-law could no longer hide her agitation. Robert calmly responded, "That is the name of my actual biological father." What? What are you talking about? I'm your father. Until recently, I didn't know myself. Just like you guys once hired a detective, I did the same. The results were quite shocking. As Robert said this, he fiddled with his smartphone and showed the screen to my father-in-law. My mother-in-law's face had already turned pale. Upon seeing the screen, my father-in-law's face reddened with anger and he began to tremble. Are you saying you cheated on me? That man is Robert's real father? For 50 years? That's not it. How is it not? There are photos of you two embracing. How do you explain that? Ignoring the loud argument that erupted between my in-laws, Robert and I instructed the movers to transfer their belongings to a nearby storage unit, though there was an extra fee. It was my in-laws who would pay. Since they had caused the situation, it was only natural they bear some of the cost. Gee, so I've been raising someone else's child? The thought of spending money on someone who isn't even my blood, someone defective, sends chills down my spine. Robert, you take responsibility and support me. What? No way. Why not? You have a duty to. As my father-in-law attempted to lash out at Robert, Robert gently pushed him aside and smiled. The one who should take responsibility is just my mom. I was only brought into this world, and besides, you guys didn't pay for my high school or college tuition. I've been supporting myself with part-time jobs since high school. How dare you say such a thing? What should I say to a dad who even took my hard-earned money? I couldn't even hang out with friends because I was busy earning tuition? It became clear why Robert particularly despised his father among his parents. However, my father-in-law acted as if it were his right. It's a parent's job to manage the money earned by their children. And the same goes for the money earned by a child's spouse. As I said, we're not related by blood. Are you talking about what's on paper? If you want to cut ties so badly, then pay back all the money you've used up till now. It's already been repaid. I've been sending money every month. What? Monthly remittances. It was a well-known fact that Robert had been sending money to his parents' home. He also paid more than the demanded amount to ensure my in-laws did not interfere in our lives. Still, it seemed my father-in-law was unaware of the remittances. Look, I've been sending $1,500 every month. $1,500 every month. What is this? Oh, now I get it. All the money I sent was used up by Mom and her lover. What? My mother-in-law was so shaken that she could not respond. Seeing this, my father-in-law approached her and slapped her across the face. My shocked mother-in-law looked back at him and screamed in anger. What are you saying? You should be grateful that a man with no money or status like you got to marry me at all. That man has both money and status. The less I thought about divorcing you, the more I could enjoy my time with him. I even let you raise his child. You should be thankful. That's a joke. I agreed to marry you because you said you were pregnant, and I was ready to be beaten up by your father. Yes, but what's the problem? I would have felt sorry if that man was beaten up. In response to this, my father-in-law was at a loss for words and stood dumbfounded. Just then, my mother-in-law's cell phone rang loudly. She looked at her phone, her face brightened, and she answered in a sweet voice. Hello, darling. Did you miss me? This sweet tone, which I had never heard before, gave me goosebumps. Robert, too, watched with a look of disbelief, yet a grin began to form at the corner of his mouth. The meaning behind this would soon become clear. Not darling. His wife. How what? Oh, no, this is a misunderstanding. Full amount, compensation. 1 million. Please wait. My mother-in-law was flustered on the phone, but it seemed the caller hung up immediately, leaving her in a state of shock. Robert began to laugh quietly. All the photos and recordings, they've all arrived. What? This was also your doing. It's about sharing information. Oh, and by the way, she has no intention of leaving him. He married into her family, and it's going to be tough for him from now on. Married into her family. Didn't you know? Apparently, he has several other mistresses too. His wife had asked him to keep his affairs limited to younger women. He might be getting scolded by her right now. Haha. He has mistresses, but he told me he loved only me. Hearing this shocking revelation, my mother-in-law collapsed into a seat. My father-in-law looked down at her with satisfaction, then, as if struck by a sudden idea, proposed to Robert. I know it's tough with a mother like this, but I'll forget this incident. Let's put some distance between you and her and have you, me, and Gina live together. Gina, I'll help you wash your back later. Stay away from Gina. Ignoring Robert's anger, my father-in-law approached me. The moment his hand touched my shoulder, I grabbed it and threw him to the ground. Ow! What are you doing? While my father-in-law was confused about what had happened, I looked down at him with cold eyes. I had learned self-defense from a young age, prepared for unpredictable situations at work. Selling insurance, even to corporations, can involve unpredictable clients. I started this training as a condition set by my father when I took over the company, and I continued it even after taking over the company, eventually enjoying the training. I had thought it might be excessive to act against a 75-year-old father-in-law, but seeing Robert looking down at him with satisfaction, I felt relieved. My father-in-law was speechless with shock, but in that moment, my mother-in-law spoke to me. Gina, you are truly amazing. I always thought you could do anything. About the compensation for his wife, Could you cover it? Living together would help our finances, and I'll help with the housework. Have you considered adopting a child? I'd take good care of them. There's no way that will happen. This house, filled with memories of my father and Robert, is not for someone like you. Why should I pay the compensation? Pay it yourself. I could speak my mind to my mother-in-law straightforwardly since I had just physically rebuffed my father-in-law. Having never directly confronted her before, she was initially stunned but quickly became enraged. How dare you speak to your husband's mother like that? I've already told the neighbors we're moving in, and I've actually started demolishing that house already. That's right, we have nowhere to live now. So instead of her, take me in. What are you saying? I am your real mother. It's only natural that we live together. As my father-in-law stood up to argue and my mother-in-law counted him, Robert calmly stated our decision. We won't live with either of you. We've decided to cut ties. If you keep this up, I'll call the police. The police. This statement caused my in-laws to become pale and retreat, arguing all the way to the station. Later, my in-laws ended up divorcing, but neither had the financial means to live separately and continued to live under the same roof. My father-in-law demanded compensation from my mother-in-law and her lover, but he also faced a claim from the lover's wife, which ultimately offset each other. My mother-in-law, with little work experience and a habit of quitting jobs over minor grievances, struggled daily. Meanwhile, my father-in-law barely managed to earn enough for both, barely making ends meet. The lover had been squeezed dry, lost his position as the next company president, and was now essentially under house arrest. After enduring a 50-year-long affair, his wife was unforgiving and intended to take everything she could from him. Despite everything, Robert recovered surprisingly quickly and regained his spirits. The lover's family had offered him to take over the family business because of their blood relation, but Robert filed a document renouncing the inheritance, saying, "It's too much of a burden for me." I felt like the Robert, who disliked competition and was not greedy at all, was his true character, and while I felt a twinge of sadness, I was also pleased by it. Recently, a client offered me a cat they had found, and now I am excitedly researching cat towers. The cat's name will be Maureen, chosen for the memories of my father and Robert fishing together, and because of the cat's sea blue eyes. Robert seems somewhat excited too, looking forward to welcoming our new family member. The doorbell rings, signaling the arrival of the client. It's time for our first meeting with our new family member. Nervously, I head to the door and, with a welcoming hello, I open it.